It's the 23rd of August 1963, and the Beatles are playing a one-nighter at Sidney Bernstein's Gaumont Cinema in Bournemouth. The concert is part of their seaside summer season, which is drawing to an end. The group's fourth single, She Loves You, has just been released, and they appear on the BBC's light programme Saturday Club radio broadcast. The Beatles wasted no time in promoting She Loves You as their upcoming single, the first of 10 BBC recordings alone of the song occurring on July the 16th, which was about 5 weeks before the record was released in Britain. The first edition of the Beatles fanzine is published just in time for the next phase of the group's trajectory, and melody maker front pages and leader articles helped to whet the fans' appetites for a new Beatles single, with verdicts of Britain's top 5 DJs, 2 of which turned out to be partners in crime committing sexual assault, and of course got away with it. A fuse had been lit under Harold Macmillan's Conservative government and the establishment generally. It was Private Eye's article on the death of artist Hal Woolf that occurred while he was in police custody that triggered the story being taken up by the national press. Woolf knew 2 members of the Profumo scandal. It was a small world back then. An organisation is only as good as its people, and the Beatles had the best people in their network, the vast majority of which were either Jewish and or gay, which was typical of the managers and producers involved with groups and artists at the time. Similar to Brian Epstein, his predecessors in the pop management business, Joe Meek and Larry Parnes, were both Jewish and gay. They say it's not what you know, but who you know, and no more would that seem more apparent than the English music industry in the 50s and 60s. Luckily, the Beatles' music publisher Dick James, born Reginald Leon Isaac Wapnick in the East End of London to Polish Jewish immigrants, knew Philip Jones, producer of the ATV TV show Thank Your Lucky Stars, who helped secure the band's first nationwide television appearance. The day after the single was released, the Beatles could be seen miming She Loves You and the B-side I'll Get You on ABC Television's Lucky Stars Summer Spin Show, which was the summer version of Thank Your Lucky Stars and aired on Saturday the 24th of August. By coincidence, they performed on stage at the ABC Cinema in Blackpool the following day. No doubt Dick James, as administrator of Lennon and McCartney's Northern Songs music publishing company, was rubbing his hands with glee when demand for She Loves You was so great that EMI pressed over 250,000 copies in the 4 weeks before its official release. What sold the record, and the Beatles though, was the sheer inane appeal of the chorus. Even now, repeat the phrase "yeah, yeah, yeah" to almost anyone in the country, or in the world, and they'll catch the reference to the Beatles. At the time, it became a song I grew tired of hearing, due to the incessant airplay the single received. In my younger eyes, matters were made worse by old folks latching on to the "yeah, yeah, yeah, ooh" chorus, singing along and repeating it every time the group's name was mentioned. Annoyingly, She Loves You became the anthem of Beatlemania, and my least favourite Beatles song at the time. Eventually I became desperate for them to release a song to replace it. September kicked off with Christine Keeler being arrested and charged with conspiracy and perjury. The Profumo affair was far from over, any more than the promotion of the Beatles, and if there wasn't enough of the group's product on the market, the Beatles' hits EP was released on the 6th of September. On the following day, She Loves You reached number 1 in the UK charts. That night, the Beatles appeared on the Mike and Bernie Winters Big Night Out show, which was broadcast by ABC TV. Of course, the Beatles mimed to She Loves You, as they did on various shows across England's TV franchises. Naturally, She Loves You was included in the set of edition 13, that's edition 13, of the BBC's light programme Pop Goes the Beatles, which grazed the radio waves on the 10th of September. Incidentally, the single was released on the 16th of September 1963 in America and received a positive review in Billboard, but it only sold 1,000 copies and failed to chart. She Loves You flopped in America, just like the group's previous two singles, Please Please Me and From Me to You. The group's previous record labels, Capitol and VJ, wouldn't touch it, having got their fingers burned with the previous Beatles singles. Not exactly a blistering start stateside for the Fab Four. Obviously, something was missing where the all-important promotion was concerned. The new Vauxhall Viva was launched on the 26th of September. Perhaps almost forgotten except in the memories of boomers is the fact that Britain used to manufacture its own cars back then. My dad worked for Vauxhalls, and I enjoyed a number of work-related events the firm organised for its workers and their families, from new car launches to a children's day out at the circus. As Prime Minister Harold Macmillan told my townfolk in 1957, most of our people have never had it so good. This was due to the increased production in major industries such as steel, coal and motor cars, which had led to a rise in wages, export earnings and investment, he told us. Where there is a coal industry, there is a steel industry, and where there is a steel industry, there is manufacturing. My dad worked in the car industry. Things were booming. For a while, that is. Until inflation reared its ugly head, and wage freezes became a major part of both Tory and then Labour government policy. On the 2nd of October, the Ford Motor Company began production of its Ford Anglia at the company's new Halewood body and assembly plant in Mersey Sound, Liverpool, the Ford Anglia being the first car George Harrison bought. October came, and you guessed it, She Loves You was included in the group's debut Ready Steady Go performance, broadcast by ATV Television on the 4th of October. With the Pop Goes the Beatles series of radio broadcasts, the group received the ultimate recognition from the BBC, and as such, the establishment also. This show was broadcast through the summer of 1963. It made commercial sense. From January 1963, the Beatles regularly drew in a UK audience of around 10 million on Saturday Club and the BBC's other radio shows. They appeared on Saturday Club 6 times that year. The 16th of March, the 25th of May, the 29th of June, the 24th of August, the 5th of October, and the 21st of December, just before Christmas. She Loves You also featured in Don Hayward's contrived BBC TV documentary, The Mersey Sound. I was allowed to stay up late to watch it and to record the audio for my father to listen to when he returned from working the night shift the following morning. The reel-to-reel tape recorder was essential equipment for this budding pop music fan. Broadcast on BBC TV on the 9th of October, the documentary set out to capture the buzz around the Liverpool sound, focusing on the Beatles, the Undertakers and Group 1. Although filmed live, the songs were dubbed with studio recordings onto the footage in the place of the live audio. But that didn't bother me at the time, as long as I got a successful recording from my dad. Why the BBC chose to feature unknowns such as the Undertakers and Group 1, instead of other groups like Jerry and the Pacemakers and the Searchers, who'd already had number 1 hits that year, I'll never know. Needless to say, She Loves You received hours of playtime across radio and television media, all leading up to the event when Beatlemania would be officially declared. On the 13th of October, the Beatles topped the bill on ATV's Val Parnell's Sunday Night at the London Palladium TV TV show, London's most famous theatre. It was regarded as a highlight of a showbiz career to play there, being one of the most watched TV shows in the UK. Outside the Palladium, fans blocked Argyle Street and spilled over into Great Marlborough Street, stopping traffic. Fans in the audience screamed so much that John yelled for them to shut up. It was this manifestation of Beatles fans' adulation that led the following day's newspapers to coin the term Beatlemania. The event was covered by the late news on ITV television. Remember, the Palladium was owned by Luke Gray's ATV Television, and Bell Parnell was managing director of ATV. The Beatles topped the Palladium bill, which gave tremendous national exposure to a TV audience of youngsters and adults. My father and I were ecstatic watching the group's performance of From Me to You, I'll Get You, and of course She Loves You, and Twist and Shout, alongside 15 million other viewers. The British press discovered Beatlemania with headline coverage of the Beatles' appearance on the Sunday night at the London Palladium and the mass hysteria that the group caused in its fans. The Daily Herald, for example, reported, "Screaming girls launched themselves against the police, sending helmets flying and constables reeling." Unaware that similar scenes had been surrounding the group's performances for many months, the press dated this event as the birth of Beatlemania. In fact, there was a queue of people all claiming to have coined the phrase Beatlemania, one being Brian Epstein's next-door neighbour. Elkan Rex Makin, usually known as Rex Makin, was a solicitor and philanthropist who practiced in Liverpool, England, for over 60 years. He was most noted for his involvement with the Beatles' early career and has been credited with inventing the term Beatlemania. Also Jewish, Makin was the family solicitor to Brian Epstein, who in 1963 sought his advice on setting up a perpetually binding contract between himself and the Beatles. However, Makin advised Epstein that such an agreement would be legally indefensible. Following Epstein's death in 1967, Makin arranged his funeral. Ironically, 2 weeks before the Beatles' Palladium performance, Billy Fury's manager, Larry Parnes, had pulled the singer from the same show in an argument over billing. Fury had been picked for the show after 96,000 readers of the teen magazine Mirabelle had petitioned Bell Parnell to feature their idol. If Parnes had been willing to allow Fury to appear second on the bill, maybe the headlines would have all been about Furymania. As things turned out, the days of the British Elvis wannabes and lookalike solo artists were over. Despite their grooming, in more than one sense of the word, for imagined stardom by their gay managers, the boys with the phony stage names, Billy Fury, Marty Wilde, and Johnny Gentle, were over, with the exception of Cliff Richard, who hung on in there. It was the turn of the groups, and of course their gay managers such as Brian Epstein and Robert Stigwood. Strange to think that only 3 years earlier, Ringo's classmate, Billy Fury, real name Ronald William Wycherley, and his manager Larry Parnes, had auditioned the Silver Beatles and other Liverpool local bands for the task of being Fury's backing band, which they failed, but were later offered a lifeline with a 7-date tour of Scotland, supporting another of Parnes' acts, Johnny Gentle. By 1963, the economy was faltering, thanks to problems with balance of payments. Prime Minister Harold MacMillan was also increasingly portrayed as out of touch. The sacking of 6 cabinet ministers in an event that became known as the Night of the Long Knives in the previous year did little to refresh the government. 1963 hadn't been a good year for Harold Superman MacMillan. It started with civil servant John Bassell being caught spying for the USSR, and the Admiralty being accused of covering it up, probably because the case involved homosexuality and coercion through blackmail. Next, Kim Philby, a senior in the Foreign Office and MI6 man, was revealed to have been passing secrets to the USSR for decades. Rather than be arrested, Philby fled to Moscow. The Duke of Argyll sued his wife for divorce on the grounds of adultery. He compiled a list of men, 2 of which were government ministers. Talking of government ministers, matters became worse for Harold when the perfumer and Christine Keeler's sex spy scandal hit the headlines, which proved to be the most damaging scandal, forcing MacMillan to resign on the grounds of ill health on the 18th of October 1963, although he lived a further 26 years. On the 20th of October, the Beatles recorded their headline appearance for ABC TV's Thank Your Lucky Stars, and they mimed to All My Loving, Money and She Loves You. The programme was recorded at Alpha Studios, Birmingham, while a reported 3,000 fans blocked the streets and attempted to storm the studios. Prime Ministers come and go. Meanwhile, the Beatles flew back from Sweden, where they had played concerts to Swedish audiences, similar to the Fab's appearances in the UK on ABC TV's Thank Your Lucky Stars and the BBC's Easy Beat Sunday radio show broadcast a few days earlier. The Swedes also got to see and hear the Fabs perform its anthem She Loves You and partake in the ever-increasing Beatlemania. The single She Loves You was released in Sweden on the 21st of August. It went up to number 10 in the Swedish charts on October the 24th, one day after the Fabs arrived in the country. The album Please Please Me was released on the 19th of July and sold 1,800 copies by the time the Beatles arrived. Of course, when the Beatles arrived back home from Sweden on the 31st of October, hundreds of screaming girls had gathered on the roof of the Queen's building at Heathrow Airport to welcome them. The scenes were broadcast on national TV news, heightening the media frenzy about Beatlemania. By coincidence, Ed Sullivan happened to be passing through the airport at the same time and witnessed the scene. It impressed him very much and led him to book the group for his show when they were still virtually unknown in the USA. Well, that's what's reported and repeated as part of the fairy tale. Ed Sullivan later admitted that he wasn't at the airport at the time. Still, it makes a nice story, doesn't it? Our favourite group were hitting the national headlines, be it on TV, radio or in newsprint. Their music could readily be heard thanks to records and radio, rock and roll having been born and reared through these two media. But it was television that had the greatest promotional impact, with sound and images being broadcast directly into people's homes and minds. She Loves You set several British sales records. The single entered the charts on the 31st of August and remained in the charts for 31 consecutive weeks, 18 of those weeks in the top 3, including every week of the months September, October, November and December 1963. After all that promotion, no one could say they'd not heard of the Beatles or Beatlemania in the UK. As for She Loves You, the song became difficult to listen to after what seemed like endless TV and radio airplay, but it served its purpose as the anthem of Beatlemania. Just please don't anybody say yeah, yeah, yeah.